Out tonight. We are going to be sorry about that, seeing old friends from community we haven't seen in a while. But we are going to be discussing our non-public safety traffic stops policy this evening. Please help yourself to food over there, as I said. Thank you to Sammy's Avenue Eatery for helping us out with the food tonight. On each table, you will find a couple different pieces of paper. We've got the agenda for the evening, and there are some note cards. We will be taking audience questions from the note cards, and there are also QR codes there, and that will take you directly to our toolkit with resources, information, research on our policy. So please feel free to use those resources throughout the night. If you have a question written down, just hold it up and someone from our office will come around and we will collect those from you. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. My name is Jen White. I am the Director of Community Affairs here in the County Attorney's Office. And we thank you all so much again for joining us here this evening. And I will turn it over to Mary.
Thank you all for being here. We're really excited to be out in community, to be hearing what your questions are and your feedback, and really talking about what this policy does and does not do. But first, I want to hold some space for some families and family members who have lost loved ones to police violence. Katie Wright, mom of Dante Wright, of course, Valerie Castile, mom of Philando Castile, and I think Amity, is Amity here?
She's running late.
She's running late, but she will be here. So, Kobe Dimmick, Kobe Dimmick Heisler, Amity is his mother, is his mother, and Tiffany Burns, the sister of Jamar Clark. So I just wanted to hold some space and acknowledge that they are here to be part of this conversation. So with that, I will hand it over to Kelsey Dawson.
I think we're going to see a short video. Okay, and then we'll get started.
On the surface, stopping vehicles for minor, non-public safety reasons might seem harmless, but the data and the voices of our community tell a different story. These stops do not make us safer. Instead, they disproportionately target Black and Native residents, eroding trust, inflicting trauma, and sometimes escalating to tragic, life-ending uses of force, as we saw in the losses of Dante Wright and Philando Castile.
I am Philando Castile's mother, and I don't think that his life should have been lost by this. A 89-cent bug.
Non-public safety stops place both our community and our officers at unnecessary risk without delivering measurable public safety benefits. Research from Ramsey County and other jurisdictions shows that ending these stops does not reduce law enforcement's ability to address real dangers on our roads, nor does it lead to increased crime. What it does is allow us to focus on what truly saves lives, deterring dangerous driving like reckless driving, excessive speeding, and impaired driving. The actions that cause devastating crashes and claim lives across our county every year.
Minneapolis woman killed and 10 others were hurt in a crash that was caused by a suspected drunk driver.
Well, a two-car crash that ended with a collision into a bus shelter in Minneapolis this morning left 2 people dead and sent 3 others to the hospital. MPD is investigating, but say it's likely speed played a role in that crash.
The disparities documented in the Minnesota Department of Human Rights investigation and the U.S. Department of Justice's finding against the Minneapolis Police Department laid bare a harmful truth. For too long, our traffic enforcement has operated on harmful stereotypes, not a focus on deterring dangerous driving.
The data is so clear. And so we embarked on that change back in September of 2021. Public safety was not negatively impacted at all. In fact, the trust that's been built between the participating police agencies and my office with the public is only enhanced.
This is why the Hennepin County Attorney's Office has implemented a policy focusing on deterring dangerous driving strategy.
We need police. We all know that and we understand that, but we don't need the type of policing that causes harm to our communities.
Ramsey County led the way in 2021, proving this approach works. And we are now following their lead, seeking to reduce disparities, strengthening community trust, and keeping people safer.
And we've got to solve more murders in this town. We've got to solve more non-fatal shootings in this town. And that's where the resources need to be going to. And if we're talking about like driving, the type of driving that really matters to the public, it's like speeding, that kills people. Drunk driving kills people. When you're driving carelessly, you're on the phone, texting, that's what kills people. We should be focused on that type of traffic enforcement and not this type.
We know dangerous driving is on the rise. We've lost too many children, family members, and neighbors to preventable crashes.
Our top story tonight, new details in the crash that killed an 11-year-old girl in Independence back in February.
But they don't show the SUV ever braking before setting off a series of collisions. By the time the dust settled, one person was dead, and paramedics had to take 9 people to HCMC, including 2 children and the driver of the avalanche.
The data is clear. When we direct our resources toward real safety risks, not broken taillights or expired tabs, we save lives and make our communities healthier and stronger.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Kelsey Dawson, and I lead our educational neglect and truancy initiatives within the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. So we divert our young people from going further into the system and work to remove barriers so each and every student can have live their life to their fullest potential and remove barriers to their education. So tonight I'm moderating this very important conversation about the Hennepin County Attorney's Office new policy on pretext stops, or also known as non-public safety traffic stops. This policy reflects a growing recognition backed by data and community experience that stopping drivers for low-level, non-safety related violations does little to improve public safety, and in fact can deepen racial disparities and erode trust between law enforcement and our community. As a mother of 4 Black children and as someone who works every single day to strengthen the relationship between our local government and our community, this issue resonates very, very deeply with me. This is about creating policies that reimagine public safety while keeping everyone safe, ensuring there's fairness, and we build trust. So tonight, we have a chance to understand how these changes will work, ask some questions, and to think how we move forward together. So we're gonna get started on that. So some of you just walked in. So the first question I'm gonna direct to you, Mary. And we saw this video that did explain it, but just to kind of have a shared understanding of what is the difference between non-public safety traffic stop and a dangerous driving stop?
Thank you, Kelsey. So the difference is a non-public safety traffic stop or a non-public safety traffic violation is something like a dangling object on your rearview mirror. Something that doesn't immediately endanger the public as you are driving. Expired tabs, that kind of thing. Does not mean it isn't against the law, but it's not jeopardizing people's safety and lives on the roads. As opposed to speeding, drunk driving, blowing through stop signs and stop lights. I live in Minneapolis. I know driving around, I never assume that a person is going to stop, even when I have the right of way, because I've just seen too many people go through. And what we need to do, what we want to do, and what we've been talking about is trying to have law enforcement prioritize enforcement of those types of driving infractions that endanger our safety. A pretext stop, by the way, I'll stop a little bit to explain that. So a pretext is essentially law enforcement, if they can say that they are pulling somebody over for a reason, like a dangling object on the mirror, it doesn't matter under law whether that's really why they're pulling them over. All they have to do is articulate something that's a violation. So when we're talking about a pretext stop, what we mean is that the police see somebody driving down the road and they want to pull that person over and kind of check them out on a hunch or whatever it is, but they have to articulate a reason to do it. So I've actually heard squad video, body camera, where officers have said, hey, what should we pull this person over for? And they're very open about it, and by the way, it is legal. It is legal. So they'll say, what should we pull this person over for? And they'll come up with a reason that is true, a dangling object or something like that. And then you can watch them walk up to the car, and they'll have a flashlight if it's at night, and they look in the car, they're looking around to see if they can see anything. So it can be a fishing expedition just to check out the person in the car. Not because they think that a dangling object from your rearview mirror is actually threatening public safety. So that is what a pretext stop is. That is what the policy focuses on, what we are calling non-public safety traffic stops. So please understand, we are not telling police don't enforce traffic violations. We're saying focus on the ones that don't jeopardize our safety. Please, by all means, go out and stop people for speeding, for going through lights, all of the things, distracted driving on your cell phone, that kind of thing, the things that actually can harm the public.
Thank you for that. I think it's really important grounding as we move forward with this conversation. And as a reminder, as you think of questions, you do have the cards in front of you, and we'll be collecting those throughout the evening, so that we can get some questions answered. Okay, so thank you for that. So you recently introduced Hennepin County's non-public safety traffic stop policy to the public. What are some details of this policy that are important for Hennepin County community members to know? And what led you to create this policy?
So, important things to know. I've already stressed. We want police to pull people over for speeding, for all of the things that we know cause terrible accidents. We don't want them to spend their time on these fishing expeditions of dangling objects from the mirror, cracked windshield, or anything like that. Now, what the policy does is list some offenses like dangling objects, where if a police officer sends us a case, so let's say a police officer pulls somebody over, and it is for a dangling object, and they search the car and they find drugs or a gun. The presumption is that we will not charge contraband that comes from that type of search. However, there is an exception. There is an exception. Because I've heard some police and community members say, well, what if? What if there's a dead body in the backseat? What if? There is an exception for public safety concerns. We will look at each case on a case-by-case basis. We do not want the exception to swallow the rule, but there is an exception for that. I know one thing, I'll just mention this because I hear this come up over and over. You all remember Timothy McVeigh, Oklahoma City bomber. Oftentimes this is used, law enforcement or people will say, hey, he got pulled over on a traffic stop. That is true, but the reason he got pulled over is because he did not have a rear license plate. That would not come under our policy. And even if it did, we would be looking at, okay, they pulled this person over on a pretext. What ended up happening here? He's the guy who just bombed the McMurrah building, and that would come under the exception. So those are, I think that's kind of generally what it is and what it is not. What led me to this point? Actually, a couple of things. One of them was meeting you, Valerie, about 8 years ago, I think.
Yeah, 9.
9?
Yes, ma'am.
So I had certainly understood the idea of pretext stops. And I had actually been in Baltimore during the Freddie Gray uprising. And I was there to do training with some friends of mine, all of whom had Black children, who had kind of grown up around this program. And I remember during the uprising, we were downtown and we were being driven out of town. And I remember it was dark in the van, and I remember my friends talking about how they did not know what to tell their children about how to come home safely at night. They just didn't know. They had thought they had tried all the things, put your hands on the steering wheel, put your hands up, all of the things, but they could not figure out what they could tell their children to keep them safe. And so when Philando was shot and killed, I started going to the memorials every year. And we met, and just hearing the stories from the community and hearing you, and just knowing that Philando was stopped about 49 times. Probably more, for equipment violations, stuff like that. And understanding how, and I will never completely understand as a white woman, but trying to understand the impact that these types of stops have on our community. The racial disparities that are created. I can only imagine what it must be like to see the lights in your rearview mirror and know that you will have to interact with a police officer if you are a Black or brown person. I will never know that, but I listen to what that's like. And I also don't think I have ever met a Black man who wasn't pulled over by the police in some kind of pretext stop, who doesn't expect to be pulled over by the police. So all of those things kind of converged. I knew of John Choi's policy from 2021. Right. We had been studying that. Another interesting thing is, I think some people think I made this up. It was interesting, Mike Freeman, my predecessor, was actually talking about doing this way back in his tenure, and he just never implemented it. So this is not new. This is based on data that comes from all around the country.
Thank you for that. Ms. Castell, so good to see you. So what was your reaction to seeing this policy for the first time?
Well, my reaction was about time. About time. Because as Mary said, and it's been 9 years that my son lost his life for an 89-cent bulb. I didn't bring it, I was in a hurry to get here and I left my prop at home. But the fact remains, I was so happy that she brought this to life because it happened in 2016, and I noticed other states were having conversations about legislation about pretext stops. Some of them had executive orders through the mayor to address pretext stops. But I can just say that over the course of his Philando's short driving experience, it was just ridiculous how many tickets that young man acquired. You know, he couldn't be that bad of a driver because he had a driver's license. But the fact remains, he was just a magnet. I don't know what it was that they just put their hooks in him and just would not let up. And I said a lot of times that if you have a negative experience so many times, you're gonna have a negative outcome. And that was the murder of my son. And I also thought a lot about those tickets and him working and having to call in and say, oh, I can't come to work because I have to go to court. You just think about all those tickets that he had and all those many times that he would have had to go to court. See, my baby's smart. He was smart with it. He had sense of, he would call down there and get the dates changed where most of his tickets would be addressed during spring break or the holiday break or some type of holiday where it wouldn't affect his attendance. He was smart enough to do that, and he had several perfect attendance certificates, and he just was this wonderful person. And to lose your life over a traffic stop is just way out there. But it happens all the time, and that's the biggie. These pretext stops, they always, I'm not gonna say always, but it seems like they go wrong for people of color. you know, is devastating and deadly when it comes to people of color. And it's no exaggeration. You can check the data according to lots of different states because it happens all over this country, and that's a problem. It's a big problem when we lose our loved ones to a mere traffic stop, minor at that. And I thought for some reason that they had different traffic stops, a minor traffic stop or a felony traffic stop, which I don't know, but that was my inkling that there were different types of traffic stops, and just the devastation and the emotional trauma, the grief that's associated with losing your child through these pretext stops, it doesn't add up. And if you just look at the data, that data tells it all. We can sit up and go back and forth, what's right, what's wrong, what's black, what's white, you know, but the fact remains that the data is the data and the data don't lie.
Thank you. Yeah, when it becomes a matter of life and death and it's the greatest loss, there has to be some action on that. So thank you. Okay, back to you, Mary. There was recent pushback from law enforcement about this policy. How is your office handling this, and are there steps to collaborate with law enforcement to ensure this policy rolls out as effectively as possible? And then the next kind of piece that you mentioned already, but this policy directly mirrors a prior policy implemented in 2021 in Ramsey County. So what have we learned from Ramsey? What can we expect from this policy based on results in Ramsey County? And as we know, Hennepin County, our focus in Hennepin County and the Hennepin County Attorney's Office is to reduce disparities. And so how does this also reduce disparities in Hennepin County?
I have my data over here, so I didn't forget what Ramsey County's data is. So Ramsey County did this policy in 2021, and they had a data person working with them. Their traffic stops fell by 86%. And that's just because of a policy that it didn't limit, because we have no power as prosecutors to limit what police officers are doing. But when we don't charge crimes, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for police to continue to engage in this kind of behavior. So the traffic stops fell 86%, which tells you that a heck of a lot of their traffic stops were pretext stops. And in Ramsey County, there was a 66% drop in the number of black drivers stopped. And an interesting thing, so at first, I think there were 3 cities maybe that agreed to do this pilot with John Choi. One was the city of St. Paul, I think one was Roseville. But the chief of police in St. Paul, Axel Henry, talks about this right now. He said he went into it being doubtful. He wasn't really thinking this would make a difference. Now, after these years, he said it has made a big difference in community trust with his department. Community trust is so important to law enforcement because to solve crimes, to investigate crimes, you need community members to come forward and give you information. And if they don't trust you, they're not going to do that. So we have the chief of police over in St. Paul in Ramsey County telling us this works. This is a great policy. So we know that across the river, right? So let me talk a little bit about the data, which is really important. And Valerie talked a little bit about it too, all around the country. Every time you look at data, it's pretty similar. Just let's talk about Minneapolis. Minneapolis, and this was 2017, 2018, when they stopped a black driver and searched a black driver, they found a gun in less than 0.5% of the time. Okay, less than 0.5%. Another way of talking about that is it had a 99.5% failure rate. Okay, so that's important. It's important for a number of reasons. That's data we actually got in the public defender's office when I was chief public defender. And we know from looking across the country, you look at any dashboard, any police department, there are very large racial disparities in terms of who gets stopped. But a question that always kept coming up, not in my mind, but this was a question that needed to be answered. And I saw it in the comments today somewhere about, Uhuru Williams wrote an op-ed piece about the traffic stop policy. I was just glancing at the comments. Somebody in there put in there, well, this is because African Americans commit more crimes at a higher rate. That is a refrain you sometimes hear. Not true, proved by data. So if you are thinking that, oh, if it's a hunch of yours, I'm gonna pull over that car, it has a black driver, maybe even unconsciously, I'm assuming they're more likely to have contraband, it is not true, and that's borne out by the data. Less than 0.5% of Minneapolis Police Department stops and searches of a black person led to a gun. So fast forward to the police officer's press conference, the day after ours, I think. The sheriff and some of the police chiefs from around Hennepin County had a press conference criticizing the policy, talking about, I'm gonna come out and say, essentially fear mongering. I think there was something like, this is a gift to criminals or something like that. But here's what was interesting. The sheriff talked about the number of traffic stops they had, I think in 2025, that yielded weapons. It was 147. Okay, so they got 147 guns in traffic stops in 2025. We don't know whether those were minor, non-public safety, we don't know. We know traffic stops, they got 147 guns. Later on, they said, we've been working really hard, we have done X number of stops this year. How many stops do you think that traffic stops do you think that they have done this year? Shout it out. 5,000. Over 100,000. They have done over 100,000. This is their own data that they put out, right? They've done over 100,000 traffic stops, 147 yielded guns. What's the number there?
Is that bad?
Yeah,
To get 147 guns off the street is not bad.
If you have a question, let's put it on the.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I couldn't just let that pass.
Okay.
So here's the deal. That is worse, underperforming the Minneapolis Police Department, right? Because they found a gun in less than 0.5% of the cases. Here, the data, I think, is like, it's got a 99.27 failure rate. So a way to put that in context is police have limited resources, right? Don't we want them using their limited resources to enforce dangerous driving and to develop probable cause and other evidence to charge serious crimes? Don't we want them spending their time doing that? And I remember being at a Chiefs conference, actually my first year, Hennepin County Chiefs conference, and a police chief asked me, are you going to have this same pretext stop policy? And I said, well, let's talk about the data. I would like to look at your data, because if it's better than MPD's, we should talk about that. I vividly remember one of the police chiefs when I said that MPD got a gun in less than 0.5% of the time saying, well, that's okay with me. And I said, let's phrase it this way. Is it okay with you that 99.5% of those stops and searches of black drivers amounted to no contraband? Think about what that must have been like for those black drivers. In my mind, it is not worth it. It is not worth the trauma, the potential loss of life, when we want police focusing on dangerous driving behavior and solving crimes.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, I think this sparks a lot of conversation and thoughts, and just we could use these note cards, because I think Jen and Glenn will start to collect back there anything. So we will have time at the end to respond, Marion and Valerie.
I apologize for my.
No, thank you. Okay, so now Valerie, how do you see this policy connecting to your ongoing fight for justice after Philando's death, which came during the traffic stop?
Say that again.
Okay. How do you see this policy, what Mary just talked about, connecting to your ongoing fight for justice after your son's death, which came during a traffic stop?
I can see it connecting because this is what I live for. This is something that we've been working for since the very beginning. And my brothers are here right now that they stood by me, you know, when I go out and do panels and talk to legislators. I've been running around that Capitol. They know me by sight, they know me by name, and they hide when they see my big self coming. They be like, this cat's still on the warpath, she's here. You know, I mean, this is very, very important because nothing that I do can help Philando now. I'm doing it for our kids. And I'm not talking about just black kids, I'm talking about people in general. I mean, if you headed to school or to work, you're trying to get there and you get pulled over and you know you haven't done anything wrong, that's just a waste of time. I mean, you haven't gotten anything and they just searching and looking, but there's nothing there. And now you're late for your job or you late for school because you've gotten pulled over and you've done absolutely nothing. And we have worked tremendously hard. I cannot tell you how many panels and working groups and people and just speaking at colleges. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. And it's all because my son was murdered in a pretext stop. And it should not happen, not in modern policing. We're living in progressive Minnesota, and we should not keep losing our children in traffic stops. And I think it's worthwhile. It works, and John Choi and I have worked on it, talked about it. John Jay College in New York, we worked with those guys as well. But something had to be done, and I was not gonna sit idly by and just let it keep happening and not speak on it. You know, the easiest thing I could have did was to do absolutely nothing. But God had bigger plans for me, and that's why I'm sitting right here still fighting for justice for all of our children.
That's right. That's right.
I think we often take for granted coming home at the end of the day or having a loved one come home at the end of the day. It seems simple, but it's huge. So thank you for sharing that. Mary, what safeguards and exceptions exist within this policy to keep us safe?
So this policy is about keeping all of us safe. And as I said, there is an exception. We will take that on a case-by-case basis. We don't want the exception to swallow the rule. In talking to John Choi about what's happened over in Ramsey County, he said they just don't get cases anymore because the police just don't do those kinds of stops, or they don't forward them to the office. He told me a little bit about their data. I think they've made 5 exceptions under their policy. 4 had to do with finding guns, 1 had to do with a lot of drugs. And so we will be looking at cases if they're submitted to us on a case-by-case basis, and if there really is a public safety concern there, that is something that we would consider charging. You know, I did want to say, because I had forgotten this, Philando was shot and killed on a stretch of Larpenteur. And that is on the way to the University of Minnesota Veterinary School. And I don't even know if I've ever shared this with you, but years ago, I had a cat that was very ill in the middle of the night, and I was driving on that road, which is really well known to have police everywhere along it, and the speed limit's about 30, 35. And I was racing to the veterinary hospital, and I was going 60. And I went right by a cop sitting in the parking lot of a gas station there. And I remember looking in my rearview mirror, waiting to be pulled over, and I was practically crying anyway because my cat was ill. And I was thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to tell the cop and all of this. I never got pulled over. And I did that right in front of a police officer. And so I think there has to be acknowledgement of the harm that this has done, and that many of us who look like me have never had to face this. I don't have to think about why I was pulled over if I get pulled over, but other people do, and I just wanted to say that. So I talked a little bit about the safeguards, and certainly we have conversations. We do this every day with law enforcement because in any case that they submit to us, we want to make sure we're understanding all of the context. Do we know everything that we need to know about this case, this person, to make a good decision about this case? We will continue doing that.
So thinking about implementation, how do you foresee this policy playing out in the city of Minneapolis versus the suburbs of Hennepin County, and why is it important that this is a county-wide policy?
Yeah, so as many of you know, the Minneapolis Police Department, actually the city of Minneapolis, has agreed after an investigation by both the state and the feds into practices by the Minneapolis Police Department. They agreed in 2 separate consent decrees not to do certain pretext stops. And they're a lot like, I think we actually took them from that consent decree. So they're the very same things that are in our policy. So think about this too. You know, sometimes people say, well, you can do anything with data you want to do. The data that we presented, Chief O'Hara was asked about it, the less than 0.5% gun. He confirmed that that was accurate. The Minnesota Department of Human Rights and the Federal Department of Justice both did thorough investigations and confirmed that the Minneapolis Police Department engaged in a pattern and practice of racial profiling. So we know that. We still have one consent decree, the state one. The mayor and the police chief have vowed to enforce the federal consent decree. So the traffic, and I think this surprises people sometimes, Minneapolis is not doing their traffic stop policy yet because even though they signed the agreement several years ago, they have to develop a policy and do training of their officers. So it's not yet in effect. We will get a report from the monitor, the IFA, that's the acronym, at the end of this month telling us how MPD is doing on their progress of developing a policy and training so that they can implement the policy here. The reason it was important to include all of Hennepin County, and I've heard this a lot from police chiefs, we're not Minneapolis. We're not Minneapolis. And that's true. That's true. They're not Minneapolis. Every city is unique. However, the data has always been the same. And when we ask suburbs for their data, we don't see it. And in 2023, when that chief, suburban chief, asked me if we were going to implement a policy like this, I said, you should start having conversations with your city council, your community, your mayor about what they want to see and show us your data. And I think that's a really important question for any police chief, any police entity that's saying this is going to cause problems. Where is your data? Where is your data? I think we're well past anecdotes, and I've heard this a lot. We get, like we had the sheriff say, we got 147 guns. How many stops did it take you to get for 147 guns? Over 100,000. So the data is critical. The data is consistent across the country. It was important since they're doing this in Ramsey County. It's been highly successful. It made no sense that a driver in Hennepin would drive into Brooklyn Park or Brooklyn Center and the rules would change there, especially when we are the prosecutor for all of Hennepin County on felonies. It also made no sense that if the Minneapolis Police Department couldn't do these things in Minneapolis, yet the sheriff could in Minneapolis or the state patrol could. So we wanted to honor all of the data throughout the country and be consistent in the findings of the consent decrees. And for all of the reasons I've talked about, that is why our policy covers all of Hennepin County.
Thank you for that. Did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to say that it is crucial that everybody is on the same page because this policy, it's actually doable and it can be tailored to different departments. I mean, it's the same thing, but if you want to add something to it, then that's fine. But if everybody on the same page, then you know what to expect. There's nothing different than if I were to cross a border into a suburb. I know that the policy is the same, but we all just need to get on board, because if there's nothing wrong with the policy, why not just accept it and let's move on? I mean, this is modern. I mean, first you have the 21st century policing, okay? So now we want a policy to go along with the 21st century. I mean, you can't keep on lagging this out. I mean, we've been fighting for this thing for 9 years, and 9 years before that 9 years, and 9 years before. None of this stuff is new. Everything that we're fighting for today has been fought for in the past. It's just ridiculous that we just keep on, spinning the wheel. We just spinning our wheels over and over again, and people are coming up with all different types of solutions. I'm gonna talk about the Lights On program so that we can have our families safe. I mean, if you got a busted tail light, they'll give you a voucher to get it fixed, and you won't have to worry about that part. But I just think that everybody should be on the same page, because it's time to move on and stop with this craziness. It's ridiculous that you have a mechanical problem with your car and you get pulled over by the police. So now you want my license, you want my insurance, you want to give me a ticket, you're going to tow my car. So those are all things that are a burden to families. Now we compounding things. You say we're in the ghetto, we ain't got no money already, but now we got all these other expenditures because of a pretext stop. And it's time for us to move on and accept the fact that it's wrong, it's dead wrong to some people. Some people don't have to worry about having to talk with their children before they leave the house to make sure they come home safe. Some people can drive their cars for 50 years and never get pulled over. Some people don't have to worry about that, but we do.
I wanted to say, so our office has pulled all of the traffic stop cases that were submitted to us that resulted in felony charges. And we're gonna reach out to each of the law enforcement jurisdictions to talk about the particular case and talk it through. This isn't being implemented by our office until October 15th. We wanted time to meet with law enforcement, have them give us feedback. But I've been clear that feedback really needs to be in the form of data. Like I said, it's not going to be persuasive if they're saying, we get lots of guns. Well, what does that mean? How many guns? How many stops? And so we are working with law enforcement. We will continue to work with them. And, we'll continue to have conversations with them.
Thank you both. I mean, Valerie, it was leading into my next question, what you had said. What is your message to people? I mean, this is a conversation that sparked, I've seen on social media, it sparked a lot of just kind of thought, and people have a lot of opinions, but what is your message to people who are worried this policy will make our communities less safe?
Oh, Lord have mercy. How can we get less safe? Let's talk about that one. I mean, the public would not be less safe. Every community has its fair share of crime, and every community doesn't. And the police, they say that they don't have a lot of police, and the resources can be pulled in an area that is needed instead of traffic stops. Our police are stressed thin, so we need to worry about things that are really important and prioritize our police departments. And when I was coming up, our police officers, they walked the street, they walked the beat. We knew the police by name, they knew us by name. If you did something wrong and the police saw you, they would take you home, knock on your door and tell your mother, you need to get him or he's gonna end up in jail or whatnot. But just having that rapport with the police, you know, it helps understanding who they are and they understanding you. And I also think that the police should live in the jurisdiction that they serve. You know, you know the police is not gonna knock little Mikey upside the head and they stay next door to the police. You know, that'll never happen. But I'm just saying that just having a rapport with the police and them showing you the same respect and dignity that they would anyone else, that helps as well. But I just think that if we all on the same page, I'll keep on going back to that. I'll say that and repeat it all day long. If everybody was on the same page, we'd come out better.
Thank you. And Mary, the same question, you talked about data too, but what is your message to people who are worried this policy will make our communities less safe?
Look over at Ramsey County, look across the country. Ramsey County, John Choi has said, is safer than it's ever been because the police are building relationships with the community because they're not pulling over people on pretext stops. They spend their resources on, developing or investigating and bringing them cases. And, the data is important there. They're actually, John told me, getting more guns now than they did before the policy. And I think that's because police are actually focusing on developing a case, a legal case to submit, not just kind of relying on hunches or, pulling people over for whatever reason. I think they're doing better police work. And so we can see public safety has actually increased in Ramsey County because of this policy. Why wouldn't that be the case here? This policy is pretty much the same as what they're doing over there. It's pretty much the same as what Minneapolis has agreed to in the consent decrees. It's, when it's implemented across the country, it has not impacted public safety and has in fact made us safer. For those people who are wondering, well, or law enforcement say, you're taking a tool away from us. What does that tool allow you to do? How successful has it been? And we look at the data and we can see it has not been successful at all, especially given the limited resources. But if they do a traffic stop, a non-public safety traffic stop, and they find something, whatever it is, there is an exception to this, and we will look at that and decide whether it's in the best interest of public safety to charge that case.
Let me say something. I also want to add that this policy is not developed to let criminals get away. That's the biggest thing. That's the only thing I heard. Oh, they're gonna let criminals get away because they're not stopping. That is not the case. We're trying to treat people fairly. We're trying to treat everyone equally. We're not trying to let criminals get away because criminal could be sitting right next to you and look just like you. But this is not the case. We're not trying to let criminals get away, but we are trying to make sure that our rights are not violated and that people are treated fairly. So I just want to throw that in there.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, now we're getting on to your comments and questions. So the first one is for you, Mary. Was this a policy you talked about during your campaign? How did voters react to it then? And can you talk more about the toolkit and how it can be used by community?
It was something I talked about during my campaign, and it was focused on building trust, actually, because this is something that police do that does not build trust in community. And when we're talking, if I could add on to what Valerie said about public safety, I think this allows police to focus their resources on solving serious crime. And devoting those resources to that. So people responded really well. When I talk to people in community, they think it's a good idea. And what was the second part?
It was
our toolkit, yeah, thank you. So we knew that people would have questions about this, and so our team put together a toolkit that is available. It has got research, data, a ton of information in there if you want to read about it. And use that information to help you in conversations with your circle, because it helps people understand what the policy is, what it isn't, and where it comes from. And that includes data from around the country.
Thank you. Jen or Glenn or Cole, I think there's some people up here that have some comments too. Okay, besides the history of the racial prejudice that has been faced among people of color for many years, what are some steps that are being taken in order to maintain fair and accurate reporting of people being pulled over rather than being a threat due to assumptions?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I think that data is individual departments. And I think that data is inconsistently kept. And so I think that one thing that all departments should be doing, if they're not doing it, they should be transparent about who's pulled over. You know, I was curious when I saw the data that the sheriff's office put out there about over 100,000 traffic stops, and 62,000 of those traffic stops, according to what they said, did not result in a citation or a coupon or anything like that, which led me to wonder, what are they doing in those 62,000 stops? And we don't know this, or maybe they know it, but they didn't share it. What is the race? What were people stopped for? And then why was there no action taken in 62,000, or about 62,000 of those cases? So, data is so important. You know, if somebody says, well, we get lots of guns, we get lots of this, that, and the other, we can measure these things. We can measure these things, we should be measuring things. So this is something that I believe very much that police departments, mayors, city council, really should be pushing to keep this data, because it's important data. And I could say, we don't want to be doing anything, none of our politics, we don't want to do anything that doesn't work. If it's not about public safety, we don't want to be doing it. And I assume that police feel the same way, and I think if police and city councils and mayors really feel that way, you have to keep the data and be transparent about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also read some things as well that talks about keeping accurate information about the traffic stop, who the person is, why they were stopped, what was done, what the race was, and this is something that they did for every stop, which is important. That way you have something to weigh on at the end of the year when you say we pulled over so many. Well, monthly, this information should be discussed at town hall meetings and things like that. And that's important as far as having this personal relationship with your police. We should have town hall meetings where they discuss what's being done, what progress is being made, what policies are changing, because we need to know as well. You know, you're policing us, so we need to know what exactly is going on in our jurisdiction.
Thank you. The next question is, how will the police be checked to ensure that the stop was non-safety or not? And then, will it not charge contraband if caught in these wrongful stops?
So we get the police report. We don't look at cases, we don't go out and investigate cases in our office. So police, law enforcement has to submit a case to us for potential charges. That has to include the police report. So we will be looking at the police reports to see the basis for the stop. We also have video. We got body camera, we've got squad video, dash cam, all of that. So we will have the police report, we'll also have the video, so we'll be able to check on that. What we don't have, because I got asked this question earlier in the interview I was doing, like the 62,000 cases, the traffic stops that didn't result, we don't get those. So we don't know what's going, which makes it all the more important that police departments keep that data. who are you stopping and for what? And what did you do and why? We don't see them. We only see the cases that police submit to us for charges. If a case is submitted to us, it's gonna depend. If they want us to consider charging it, we'll talk to them about why. It's important to charge a particular case in violation of the policy. I can tell you, drug cases, off the top of my head, are probably not gonna be an exception unless there's a huge amount of drugs. Guns, we'll have to have that conversation.
Thank you. Okay, next question. If you discourage stops for tabs, what is the motivation for getting up-to-date license plates and therefore having insurance?
Yeah, so one of the things that Ramsey County does that we, and this is Clarence Castile has a lot of information on. So Minneapolis has had coupons for lights on, and those are essentially the police stop you, let's say they stop you for a broken taillight, and you don't have the money to fix it. They could give you a coupon so that you can go and get it fixed for free. The issue with that in Hennepin or Minneapolis is that the police are pulling that person over, right? So that interaction is still there. What they've been able to accomplish in Ramsey County is that the police can enter that into a computer and a letter is sent out to that individual with the coupon. So that means there isn't that interaction. We are partnering and working towards that. What is the incentive to be? Police can still cite people without pulling them over. And so, the motivation to have insurance is if somebody hits you, it's just, that's a motivation in and of itself.
Hit somebody.
Or you hit somebody. In terms of the tabs, there are a lot of people who don't have tabs. People can get ticketed for that without being pulled over for a non-public safety traffic stop. So we're trying to focus resources that are pretty limited on those things that really affect public safety.
Was this policy created with law enforcement? Yes or no? And why or why not? And how do you get buy-in from police?
Yes and no. Did I say that in the first thing? Like my first year in 2023, I was at a chiefs meeting and I said this where one of the police chiefs said, "Are you going to do this pretext policy?" And I started to talk about the data and I said, "You guys need to start talking about this." My first year in 2023, so my first meeting with the police chiefs, I said to them, "What do you want from the county attorney's office? What can I do to build our relationship?" And they said two things: communication, and we want to be part of policy building. I said, you got it. I appointed a very experienced prosecutor to be their liaison. They've got his cell phone number. They got my cell phone number. I met with them 4 times a month in small groups to get their input, to try to build policies with them. And unfortunately, when we charged the trooper, they refused to meet with me. That was the end of that. I would like nothing more than to work with them. There are about 38 different police entities in Hennepin County. That's like 38 different police chiefs. Some of them are great to work with. Some of them will never agree with anything that we do, which is fine, except that they then, if we were trying to work on a policy, would immediately leak it. The Hennepin police chiefs hired a Republican PR firm in order to message kind of against me. To collaborate, it does require some good faith. And we did collaborate with them. We came up with our youth auto theft initiative with them. We worked on Brady with them quite a bit. And then they went to the legislature and opposed our bill, which actually would have made it easier for them. But, it's very difficult to collaborate with 38 people with different agendas. We will be meeting with them. To date, by the way, I have not heard from a single police chief. not heard from them. And as I said to you, our implementation date is October 15th. We will continue to work with them. I mean, I don't take my ball and go home because people are mean to me or, you know, I have a perceived slight or something like that. You all, the public, expects us to work together. That's why we're here in these jobs. We should be collaborating, but it has been extremely difficult. We will take in their feedback. Anyone that wants to meet with us, we'll take their feedback in. But once again, what I will tell them is, I want to see your data. I want to see your data. And if for some reason your data is different than the rest of the departments in the country, then tell us what you're doing, because you're doing something a lot better or something new that nobody else knows about.
Let me say something. I wanted to say that since 2016, I know I've been working with law enforcement because I really needed answers. I needed to understand what happened and pretty much why this guy didn't end up in jail, because it was clear what happened. But I just couldn't just let that slide. I wanted to know. So I've had conversations with them, and this pretext stop issue is not a secret. They should have been expecting this at some point because it's been talked about since 2016. So having it put in that consent decree, you know what I mean? Police, they some different people, because it's like, okay, we gonna tell them this and we gonna tell them that, and then you don't say anything. They're not gonna say anything. So it's like, okay, it just goes away, but it's in writing, it's written in the consent decree. But then you wanna act like you're surprised when somebody say, oh, well, wait a minute, what about this right here? Let's implement, let's talk about this. Let's bring this up, let's bring it to the forefront. And then you get willy-nilly and act like it's a big surprise. But we've been talking about this stuff for 9 years, and 9 years before that, and 9 years before that. It's no secret, we've been headed in this direction. It's just that we live in the sleepy dog state. You know, you go to sleep and nobody says anything. But it shouldn't have been a surprise, but conversating with them, it is difficult because they have been doing things their way for so long. Change is hard for them. So we just have to stay vigilant and keep fighting for what we believe in and for what is right.
Thank you. You know, the spirit of collaboration and openness is critical to this conversation, which kind of leads into this next question. What can elected officials do in support of this policy for non-public safety stops?
I think that's a great question. There was criticism of it on social media from people who clearly didn't read it, elected officials who didn't read it, who didn't understand it. I've seen a lot of misleading information out there. And so I think it is really important for elected officials to support this. Or, you know, if they don't understand it completely or they have questions about it, to pick up the phone and call, to reach out to understand what are you doing on it, like why, all of the things, to read the toolkit. I think what we're seeing a little bit now is that law enforcement in Hennepin County, not Minneapolis, but law enforcement in the suburbs is upset. And then we have electeds just kind of jumping on board. I mean, I got a letter from 2 Republican legislators asking me, you know, to account for why I'm endangering public safety. I mean, and it was like, have you read? Have you read the policy? Have you read the toolkit? Why don't you, and maybe it's to their credit that they sent me a letter to talk about it. So I think it's really about understanding it. You don't expect anybody to support any policy that they don't understand completely. So seek to understand. Read it, reach out, ask, and then if you disagree, you disagree. But it is important for community members, I think, to see their elected officials supporting something that has been worked on you've been at the legislature trying to get bills passed about this, and that hasn't happened. So all the data's there. I think would be a great idea for you to reach out to your public official, your elected officials, and say, hey, this is really important. We would like you not only to support it, but to speak out about why it's a good thing. Particularly, it interests me that, and somebody asked me this today, why is it so controversial when you do it and when John Choi's been doing it since 2021? What's the deal there? And I good question. But it is helpful for all of us to say, hey, you only need to look across the river to see that this was implemented in 2021 and everything is fine. And in fact, the police chiefs are behind it. And it's increased public safety and public trust. And just, try to focus them on that. But it is an important thing for elected officials to get behind, because then I think it's easier for community members to get behind it as well. And to be saying to their law enforcement, hey, we agree with this. We want you to get on board.
Look, I keep on grabbing the mic. I'm glad. But anyway, another thing, we don't have commitments. That is a big thing with me. Like I said, they talk about things and say, oh, okay, we'll do this, we'll do that. But you can't get them to say that word. We're committed. We're going to do that. We are committed to making this work. We're committed to this or that. They will not make the commitment. And that's the missing piece. That's the missing piece of the puzzle, is commitment. Because you can talk all day long and say whatever you want to say and renege on it big time. But if you make a commitment, that's saying you stand by your word, and your word is bond, and you believe in what you're saying. But until we can get people to make commitments, we still gonna be spinning our wheels.
Thank you. Well, I mean, it's almost like you knew what the next question was.
Oh,
it kind of goes, it goes right into it. But I mean, I think it's really important because you talked about commitment. We've heard from Mary talking about the why and what led to this policy, and you're with Freeman before you. So what happens to this policy after you leave?
Well, good question. My hope is that, as John Choi said, police become accustomed to it and they just stop doing these kinds of stops, which would become the culture there. Also, the next election, it's really important for community members to speak out about what they want. Whoever comes in, I think it needs to be asked in campaigning. Specifically, do you support this policy? What will you do? Same thing with everything else we've done, like our conviction integrity unit. Will you keep the conviction integrity unit independent? So I think really specific questions, making sure that people commit and they actually answer questions. Is kind of, one of my goals is really to help educate people about what kinds of questions to ask, so that they can understand the system really well, because this is your system. This should be your system. And it shouldn't be mysterious and it's just doing the things it's always done. You should be able to ask elected, appointed people hard questions about what they're going to do when elected and get commitments from them to do it. So my expectation, my hope is that this will continue and that police will actually start doing it, and they'll realize the sky isn't going to fall, that Hennepin County is just the same as Ramsey County, and that actually they will invest their time more in developing, investigating cases and bringing us cases, more cases to charge.
Okay, what's the question again?
No, it was more for Mary. It was what happens to this policy after?
Well, like Mary said, we have to be open and honest and ask questions. What are you going to continue this policy, or you're gonna do this, or you're gonna do whatever that you feel is important, and prioritize that, and make sure that they're gonna do exactly what you would like for them to do, because you don't want to vote anyone in that doesn't meet your goals and your values. If you have values and the person that's running for office doesn't share your values, then I don't think you should vote for them. But I don't know who that would be, but this policy is not anything that would jeopardize or arm or a leg. I mean, it's common sense. I mean, why create problems for people? And when you do stop people, you may not find anything. You holding them up, you causing more drama and anxieties, because those lights, I mean, I don't know if it's just the color of the lights and they designed it that way, because your whole inside start turning when the lights get behind you. So I don't think it's necessary, and if you haven't done anything wrong, if you're not swerving and almost ran over something, or you actually committed a crime, I don't think you should be pulled over. That's just my thought process. And somebody else might have a different thought. But if the person has not done anything and it's just a mechanical issue on the car, why waste their time and yours? But if they don't have no insurance, okay, now we can give them a ticket. Oh, you can't drive that car without no insurance. Let's tow their car. So now you causing harm because you putting another burden on it, but you also making money for the state.
Thank you. When will this policy be made public? It seems as if this is a need-to-know basis, however, those that are affected aren't represented here.
The policy is public. We put that out. We put out a toolkit about all the data, so I think we've been as transparent as we possibly can be. And we will make data public too, in terms of cases. So, and I'm not sure, I don't know the last part of the question, people who are here that are not impacted?
It seems as if this is a need-to-know basis, however, those that aren't affected aren't represented here.
Those that aren't affected or aren't?
Those that are affected aren't represented here.
I don't know who those people are. Maybe law enforcement. I'll continue to say that law enforcement has the opportunity. They could have come to.
They're always invited.
They're always invited. I will say, I think it was Wayzata Police Department that posted this event on their website, and so any police department can be here. All the police chiefs have my phone number. They really do. They call us frequently when they're not happy about something, which is great. We would like to have communication. So the policy is transparent. We will be transparent about data. Happy to answer any questions, and we'll be working with law enforcement.
Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left. I have 2 more questions and then a kind of a wrap-up question, just so everyone knows kind of where we are with time. All right, our next question is author Mark Bray discusses ethics of violence based on society's indifference to systemic violence. Is this in line with your policy of non-public safety traffic stops? Is societal indifference at issue?
Well, I just want to ask a question. Is that a book somebody? Is that a book somebody that wrote and said somebody? Everybody don't read them kind of books. We keep doing other stuff. What's the name of the book? Is that a book? Is that
Well, it's an author Mark
a
Bray
author?
discusses ethics of violence based on society's indifference to systemic violence. Is this in line with your policy of non-public safety traffic stops? Is societal indifference at issue?
I ain't read it.
Yeah, I haven't read that. I do read a lot. I read a lot. In fact, I just read James Densley and Gillian Peterson's book about mass shootings and violence. I read about violence all the time. And I think societal indifference is about how we help particularly young people who are growing up in traumatic situations and they experience trauma, whether it's in foster care, whatever it is. I see young people involved in the system, and when I look at their reports, everything about them, I can see tremendous amounts of trauma that was never, ever addressed effectively. And it's not that every young person who's experienced trauma is in the system, that's not it at all, but every young person who's in the system that's committed some kind of violent crime has a tremendous history of trauma. And to me, when I hear about societal indifference, it is societal indifference in addressing that. Because I can tell you, I have met with a number of families who've lost loved ones, and saying to them, I'm so sorry about what happened means nothing, right? But I know, had we invested the resources where we should have, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here. And so when I think about these traffic stops, I think, how much more harm could they cause than taking your son's life? And for what? To maybe find a gun in less than half of 1% of the time you pull people over. And so, to me, there's a lot of societal indifference about how we address the issues that lead to violence. And that's a real problem because we don't put the resources there to help people who are living in communities where they see gun violence. And I could go on and on about that, but I won't. I think I've said enough about that, especially not having read that book.
I didn't read the book. I am the book. I don't have to read the book. I'm the book. And I can say, I had went and did a little thing at the American Public Health Association. And I learned something that I'll never forget, and it starts in the womb. How when we're born, that maternal bond through breastfeeding affects us as a child, as an infant. And then you grow up, and as you're growing, you're learning, and how even being hungry, not having food, living in poverty, how that affects you as you continue to grow. So now you're hungry, your father's angry because he don't know how to care for the family, so he hits the wife, and the wife hits the child, and the child goes out, he's hungry, he goes and starts stealing. So he gets caught by the police, so he ends up going to jail. And it's just this repetitive thing that starts in the womb that I never, ever thought about. And once I thought about that, it made a whole lot of sense. And that's a part of societal. I mean, it's what it does, you know, but I can't explain it because it was something so different. I had never heard it explained in that magnitude, how one thing that bond with your mother and poverty and being hungry can lead to death. You know, and I was so happy that I did it, that I came. And I learned that, and everywhere I go and people listen to me, I talk about that relationship, that maternal relationship, and the environment that you grow up in, and how it could lead to a death. You know, and I didn't read the book, but some of the other ladies that read the books, because they had alphabets behind their names. I was just Valerie Castile. But the other women, they had alphabets behind their names, so they knew what they were talking about. But it was just a learning experience that I wanted to share. Thanks.
I just wanted to say, before we had free lunches in school, Valerie Castile was paying off school lunch debt. A huge number of school lunch debt. We need to acknowledge that.
shameless plug for the work in our office, just speaking along these lines, this really comes full circle of the investment that Mary's really made into ensuring our kids we're doing every barrier we can to get them into school, because that's really also where it starts, of just being engaged and kind of knowing that you're part of something bigger than yourselves, and it really it's really this kind of full circle moment in our office around all the areas that we're really investing in under this leadership. So, okay, the final audience question. Do you think this policy will have a bigger impact in diverse cities like Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center?
Probably yes, because as you know, the data shows in Ramsey County, traffic stops went way down, and what did I was like 66%, 60% drop in the number of black drivers stopped. So I would expect it to make a bigger difference in more diverse populations.
Well, I can definitely speak about Brooklyn Park. I've been to several of their town hall meetings where they talk about all the positive things that they're doing in the community as far as getting to know the residents and holding and hosting different events where the community is definitely invited, and they know the numbers. I've seen it on the screen where they talks about that one building on Zane, how they've kind of cleaned that up and looked for the root cause of the issues that are happening over in that particular apartment building. So they actually care. So I can see the policy working with them. It just has to be discussed with them. I don't know if they know about it, but I'm pretty good with the police over in that area. So I could definitely reach out to them and speak with them, because the only way you're gonna get something done is communicate. You know, I mean, they may be uncomfortable, you may be uncomfortable, but those conversations have to be had, because if you're not heard, then there cannot be a correlation, there cannot be no understanding if you don't have those conversations. So I'm always willing to express myself. I might get a little tongue-tied or whatnot, but I get my point across at the end of the day. It's all about communicating. If you don't communicate, then there's nothing there. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're at time. Our last question to both of you. Do you see this policy as a meaningful step towards reimagining public safety, or one small piece to the puzzle? And what more would you like to see to make our community safer?
I would say it's one small piece of the puzzle. In among the many pieces that we're working on in our office, you mentioned Kelsey, our Be in School program. We've invested a lot of resources in trying to get kids in school. We've done our Youth Auto Theft initiative. We have done so much in terms of trying to invest in young people, but we have so much more to do. We are right now working on implementing an emerging adult teams. That would be ages 18 to 25, and trying to figure out how to wrap services around them that will help them be more successful, because we know their brains are completely formed then, if you know somebody in that age group. But they have different issues than young people under 18. And we know that they're dealing with trauma. That's a huge thing. We're trying to figure out how to we can find the resources to try to address some of that trauma. So there's a lot more work to be done. It's a big piece, but it's also a piece and maybe a big piece in a big puzzle. And there's so much more work to do, not just in our office, but in our community.
Yeah, like I said, Brooklyn Park is doing a lot of things at their community center. They have job fairs during the summertime. They have several workshops. They have a mental health piece as well. It's a lot that they do that I wish that we could do all over the city. And I think that we need more resource centers for our kids. We lived over in the Rondo area, and when they closed down the Boys and Girls Club over there, it took a tremendous hit for our kids in that neighborhood because they had nowhere to go. So, you know, the old cliche, the idle mind is the devil's workshop. You know, the kids got into trouble and things like that, but if we can have more resources for things that really matter. You know, our kids are traumatized. I mean, these kids are going crazy right now. They shooting each other and killing each other. I mean, there is community issues in every community. There's some type of violence, but we need to get a grip on these kids. Seriously, we need to get a grip on these children because we're you know, it's going outside of the communities now. You know, it's so much, it's spilling over, it's spilling all over the place. And we just really need to find out these root causes and why are our children acting the way they are and doing the things that they're doing. We need to figure that out, and we need to figure it out fast.
That's right.
So that concludes our night. I want to thank our Hennepin County Attorney, Mary Bernardi, and Ms. Steele for both of your leadership in this. And thank you everyone here tonight. Policies like this are about reshaping the way we think about our justice system. And if you have further comments or thoughts, they do have cards right there, the resident information cards, and we are certainly open to any of your thoughts or feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.